The Dirty Dozen is a 1967 war film that stars the always lovable Lee Marvin, and it features an ensemble cast which includes Ernest Borgnine, Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, John Cassavetes, George Kennedy, Robert Ryan, Telly Savalas, Robert Webber, and Donald Sutherland. Robert Aldrich directed the movie, and it was filmed entirely in the United Kingdom. The plot revolves around the fact that in March of 1944, a rebellious U.S. Army major is, quote, volunteered to train 12 convicted military criminals for an impossible mission. They need to parachute into a heavily guarded Nazi General Staff officer's retreat to try to assassinate German officers that are on leave. In order to get this unorthodox assignment done, the major must convince Army brass to grant pardons to these men. Then he has to try to mold these 12 into a functioning unit, which is a task that's made more daunting by the doubts of a by-the-book general and by the dangerous nature of this mission. Lee Marvin often told the story about how the director instructed his cast to get their contemporary hairstyles changed to ones that are more fitting for the time and setting. Marvin immediately got a crew cut, but many of the others merely got trims. After telling them twice their looks were unacceptable, that they needed to either come in with their hair cut correctly or else call their lawyers. The director was told at one point that this movie would be in line for an Oscar, with him named as Best Director, if he cut out the scene where Jim Brown is dropping the hand grenades down into the bomb shelter. This scene was considered too controversial to be on the screen because the Germans, including women, were locked inside the bunker and had no chance or possibility of surviving. Aldrich considered it, but he elected to leave that scene in to show everybody that war is hell. As the production ran over schedule, Frank Sinatra ended up advising Trini Lopez to quit the production so that his recording career wouldn't lose its momentum or popularity. It's said that Lopez took Sinatra's advice and quit, but there's also another account stating that his agent demanded more money for his role in the film, and the director and the studio refused to grant it. Originally, Lopez's character was supposed to be one of the heroes. He was to be the one to ignite all the dynamite that would destroy the entire chateau. With his abrupt departure, his character was written off as being killed during the parachute jump. In the film's original scene, while Reisman walked down the line of condemned men, all of their individual crimes are listed out loud, along with their names and their prison terms. In subsequent, more politically correct years, there are some noticeable gaps in the audio of the film. As it lists the crimes, some of them have been deleted from the soundtrack. Some of these are done seamlessly, while others seem more awkwardly done, with long pauses of silence. On the eve of the final battle, they are eating in the guard's hut. The fact that they are 12 men, plus the leader, and the fact that they are all sitting on the same side of the table with their backs to the wall really resembles The Last Supper, painted by Leonardo da Vinci. It definitely seems like it's an omen for those who die. The movie was shot in various locations in England, primarily in Hertfordshire. The major part of the training sequence was shot at Hendon Aerodrome, about 7 miles north of central London, while the besieged chateau was built at MGM's British Studios in Borehamwood. John Wayne was first offered the role for the part of Major John Reisman, but he declined it. The part was then offered to Lee Marvin. Wayne's refusal was due because of his disapproval of the original script. in which Reisman's character has a brief affair with a married woman whose husband is fighting overseas. Other sources mention, though, that there was more to it, and the reason that Wayne turned the film down. He wasn't too interested in being in the UK for the entire film shoot, because at the time, his third wife, Pilar, was due to give birth in February of 1966. Lee Marvin has often mentioned a joke that was pulled by the director on Charles Bronson, who was about 5'9" in height. When it came time to set up the first inspection scene, he placed Bronson between the 6'6" Clint Walker and the 6'4" Donald Sutherland. It's said that the director couldn't quit laughing over Bronson's perturbed reaction, which emphasized his small stature. This movie's financial success allowed the director to buy his own film studio, which opened in August of 1968. His plan was to produce up to 16 films there over the next 5 years. But the failure of his first 2 productions kind of scuttled his hopes on doing this. He was soon forced into a 4-picture deal with ABC Palomar. His pictures under that contract were not hits either. The director never regained the box office status that he had with this film, or the critical acclaim that he had in the 1950s. He did enjoy something of a comeback with the movie The Longest Yard in 1974. Lee Marvin provided technical assistance because of his military background with the uniforms and the weapons. They wanted him to do this to create a more realistic portrayal of combat, yet he bitterly complained about the falsities in some of the scenes. The director would often tell him that the whole plot was preposterous, and that by the time the audience had left the cinema, they would have been so overwhelmed by action, explosions, and killing that they would have forgotten about the lapses created in the film. The cast really enjoyed being in England, spending a lot of time in what was then swinging London, with Lee Marvin leading the way usually. He would often disappear on motorcycle outings, and they would have to chase him down to the various bars that he was drinking in. Clint Walker had an unusual experience while there because he was a well-known TV star for the show Cheyenne, and with other film roles under his belt, people recognized him. At one time, he visited Buckingham Palace, and he was just marveling at the famous immobile guards. But as he turned and started to walk away, one of them yelled at him and asked for his autograph out the side of his mouth. At a cocktail function in London, Lee Marvin got drunk, and he propositioned an older woman in a very vulgar manner. His speech was so slurred that she asked him to repeat it, and he did. That woman turned out to be Sean Connery's aunt. Sean Connery was coming over to intercede in the altercation. In doing so, he passed the producer, Kenneth Hyman, and he intervened completely with it. He begged Sean Connery to not hit him in the face. He stated that we've got close-ups to do tomorrow morning. We don't need swelling or bruises to cover up. Fortunately, Connery saw the funny side to all this, and he just roared with laughter. I just love talking about films that had Lee Marvin in them because he just adds an excitement to the production. He's always doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing, and the production crew is always trying to keep up with him, which in itself is impossible. Marvin really didn't like this movie. He called it crap, but he did know it was a moneymaker, and he enjoyed doing the film. Take a look back at this classic from the 60s. It's always a fun watch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.